Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. When I bought my house a few years back, I made sure to ask if it was part of any homeowners association. The real estate agent assured me it wasn't, and that was a huge relief. See, I'm not a fan of homeowners associations. I value my privacy and want to make my own choices when it comes to my property. The last thing I need is some nosy neighbors telling me what color my house should be or fining me for having my trash cans visible. So yeah, avoiding an homeowners association was a must for me. The neighborhood my house is in is pretty small, just a dozen or so houses on a quiet cul-de-sac. Most of my neighbors keep to themselves, besides the occasional friendly wave or stopping to chat about the weather. It's a peaceful area, perfect for my family. Or at least it was until the Wilsons moved in across the street. Right away, I could tell they were the type who'd fit right into an homeowners association board. They seemed obsessed with having the perfect suburban life. Their lawn was always freshly mowed, garden beds immaculate, the whole 9 yards. I didn't think much of it at first. To each their own, I figured. But then the comments started. It was little things at first. Mr. Wilson mentioning how some houses looked a bit shabby and could use some sprucing up. Mrs. Wilson wrinkling her nose at my daughter's brightly colored play set in our front yard. Sideways glances at my slightly overgrown bushes. The real trouble began when I got a piece of mail from something called the Cul-de-sac Community Association. It was a letter informing me that I owed $200 in homeowners association fees. I was shocked and immediately marched over to the Wilsons' house, letter in hand. Mr. Wilson answered the door, grinning widely. "Ah, you got our notice. As new president of the Homeowners Association, I'm pleased to see everyone paying their dues." I shook my head in disbelief. There is no Homeowners Association here. I specifically avoided buying a house with one. He laughed condescendingly. "Well, we decided it was time this neighborhood had some standards put in place. Things have gotten a bit unsightly around here." My frustration mounted. "You can't just create an Homeowners Association. Every resident has to vote and agree to be included. I certainly don't." Mr. Wilson's smile faded. "Now see here, we're just trying to improve everyone's property values, including yours. A small yearly fee ensures everything is kept neat. You really should cooperate." I stood firm. "I'll say it again, I am not part of your so-called homeowners association. I won't be paying any fees, fines, or anything else." His friendly facade dropped completely as he huffed, "We'll see about that," before slamming the door in my face. Over the next few weeks, things escalated quickly. I received violation notices for minor infractions, like having too many garden gnomes or not watering at specified times. When I tossed them in the trash, the fines piled up into the thousands. Fed up, I decided to fight back. I researched homeowners association laws in my state and learned the Wilsons had no authority to impose an homeowners association on unwilling residents. I sent them a cease and desist letter demanding they stop the harassment. I also rallied my other neighbors, warning them about the Wilsons' shady tactics. Most were just as outraged as I was. Unfortunately, the Wilsons had a few cronies drinking their homeowners association Kool-Aid. Together, they concocted a scheme to make my life difficult. They filed frivolous noise complaints against me constantly. They reported my yard for being dangerously overgrown when it was just in need of a mild mowing. I even caught one of them letting their dog poop on my lawn deliberately. The last straw was when I came home to find an ugly lien had been placed on my house for unpaid homeowners association fines. This lien prevented me from being able to sell or refinance my home. I saw red. These lunatics were sabotaging my rights as a homeowner. I immediately got in touch with my lawyer and discussed my options. She said because there was no legal homeowners association agreement I signed, their lien was completely fraudulent. She helped me take the necessary steps to contest it. I sent a forceful letter threatening to sue if they did not remove the lien at once. That seemed to knock some sense into the Wilsons. The lien was removed quickly, and the bogus violation notices ceased. With the advice of my lawyer, I also sent letters to the other neighbors who were complicit, warning them against any further harassment. For a while, things were peaceful again, but I knew better than to believe the Wilsons had given up so easily. I made sure to document everything, just in case this ended up in court. Sure enough, a few weeks later I spotted a shiny new sign installed at the neighborhood entrance. Cul-de-sac Community Association, a deed-restricted neighborhood. I immediately ripped it out of the ground and chucked it in my trash can. These lunatics actually had the audacity to lie and claim this was a deed-restricted community subject to an homeowners association. I called my lawyer and asked her to send the scariest legal threat she could come up with. I included photocopies of my deed and paperwork proving no homeowners association existed. Finally, the Wilsons cracked. Faced with legitimate lawyers and vocal opposition from angry neighbors, they realized their dream of controlling our little community wasn't happening. They suddenly moved away a month later, hopefully to terrorize another neighborhood. This whole ordeal was ridiculous, but I'm glad I stood my ground. Bullies like the Wilsons back down if you gather allies and threaten them with legal action. In the end, our quiet cul-de-sac returned to normal. I can finally garden and live in peace without worrying about fines for having my trash cans visible from the street. My home is my sanctuary, and no bogus homeowners association is going to change that. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I was a kid back in the 80s, 2 years out of college, when I moved into an apartment by the shore in NJ. When the cold weather arrived, there were always a few days when the apartment was cold. We would tell the superintendent, and then the heat would start arriving. One year, the heat started decreasing in February, and inside the apartment was like the 50s, and we had to start wearing coats. We told the superintendent about it, and nothing happened this time. We wrote the landlord about it, and still, nothing. So we checked with an attorney and learned about the warranty of habitability and withholding of rents. So yet another certified letter to the landlord, and we started withholding rents. He filed a motion to evict us, and we answered with the Marini defense, depositing the withheld money with the court. The judge found in our favor for all the money we withheld. We continued to live there because there just weren't many other options as we saved for a home. Flash forward to living there for 6 years. On the last lease, because we are about to buy a home, we wrote in a clause that we can break the lease with 45 days' notice in writing, similar to his 45-day clause. They didn't notice it because it was slightly obscured on the top left of page 2, so they signed off on it and returned it to me. So in the middle of the lease, we gave the 45-day written notice, made the rent payments, and left. They didn't return our deposit, so we sued for it, demanding double. They sued us for the remainder of the 6 months' rent and refused to return our security deposit. This is no longer small claims court, but we proceeded without an attorney anyway. They are expensive. We arrived at the courthouse, and the court forced a round of arbitration. The arbitrator said we would lose in front of the judge and to pay the rent remainderments. We refused and waited for the judge. While waiting, the landlord's attorney dropped by and asked why we didn't take the arbitrator's advice. So we told him about the clause we wrote in, and he stated he saw it too, and that since it was crossed out, it's not part of the deal. We showed him our copy of the lease where it's not crossed out, and his face went white as a sheet. He made a call to the landlord, who then offered to properly break the lease with no penalty and return our security deposit in full. We refused, and we showed him the certified letter stating that we would have accepted that deal up until yesterday, but that if you force us to come down to court, we want double damages for the improper withholding of the security deposit. He tried again to reach out to the landlord, but no luck this time. We went to see the judge. He looked at both leases and called their attorney to the bench. The judge took our lease and thrust it toward their attorney and said, "This is the lease in force." Their attorney started walking around the courtroom like a chicken with his head cut off, while I tried to laugh as quietly as possible. The judge found for us for double damages. We received nothing for a week, and I went back to the courthouse where the clerk said they should pay that judgment immediately, and told us about chattel execution and gave us that form. A couple of weeks passed, and a check appeared from the landlord. Another month passed, and we got a call from the court. They had our money. I told them the landlord had sent a check a while back, so all is good. She told us that we should have informed the court that we got the money to stop the chattel execution from occurring. The court sent the sheriff to their offices and confiscated office equipment and sold it at auction to satisfy the judgment. They said, "Don't worry, they will just return the money to the landlord." That is the revenge, getting the money and having them experience the abrupt seizing of their assets at their place of business, having it sold at auction, and then having the money returned to them. Major pro-justice. The next one is a petty revenge story. This is a tale my mom told me about an encounter she had with a wild Karen and how she got a little bit of revenge against her for being, well, a Karen. This took place some years back when I was in high school. Not sure if they still do, but at the time, my old high school held an annual charity auction. All kinds of items of all shapes and sizes were donated to the school for this event. A traditional auction was held in the gym for the bigger, more expensive items, while the smaller items were delegated to silent auctions in the cafeteria and hallways. If you don't know how a silent auction works, in this case, the items were set out on a table, each with a sheet of paper where interested parties could write down their names and how much they wanted to bid. Each table had a little timer to indicate how long the silent auction lasted, and a pen so guests could write down their bids. One year, my parents decided to attend the auction. The items on sale in the gym were a bit too pricey, so my mom decided to focus on some of the silent auction items. When they arrived, she spotted a few she was interested in, wrote down a bid, and she and my dad went off to enjoy the rest of the event. Sometime later, my mom went wandering again and happened upon one table just as the timer on it was about to run out. This table had one of the items she bid on, and she was still the highest bidder until Karen entered the picture and outbid her. Under normal circumstances, my mom would have been content to let the item go, wanting it but not bad enough to start a bidding war over it. However, she changed her tune after witnessing what Karen did next. There's only one pen per table, and to ensure no one tried to outbid her, once Karen finished writing her bid, she proceeded to hold the pen to her chest like Gollum clutching the One Ring. Needless to say, Karen wanted to win no matter what and refused to give up the pen even when politely asked. Not taking too kindly to cheaters, my dearest mother decided it was time Karen was taught a lesson with a bit of petty revenge. There was a student monitoring the tables, and she asked him if he had a spare pen, which he did. She took this pen and proceeded to write down her next bid very, very slowly. Remember when I said that my mom arrived just as the table's timer was almost up? Well, there was less than a minute left, and my mom wrote as slowly as possible to stall for time so Karen couldn't follow up with another bid. Karen tried, of course. Upon seeing what my mom was doing, Karen took her coveted pen and tried to write in another bid under my mom's name while she was still writing. But my mom, being left-handed and Karen right-handed, positioned her hand and arm in such a way that Karen couldn't get in. When my mom told me this story, she demonstrated all the ways Karen tried to squeeze in, and it was hilarious. Mom kept an eye on the clock, and when there were only a few seconds left, she quickly finished writing her bid, and that was that. She won. The student prevented Karen from trying to write another bid, and Karen walked away defeated. Moral of the story: play fair and don't be a jerk. You never know who is watching and what it will bring out in people. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Back in 2014, I was hired to work on a cruise ship. I started off as a lowly restaurant steward, busting tables and mopping floors in the buffet. After a few months, I was promoted to backwaiter and was moved to the main dining hall. I quickly caught on to the backwaiter duties, and my front waiter, whom we'll call Bert, not his real name, took notice of my hard work. After a couple of weeks in my new position, Bert told me that it's only a matter of time before I get promoted to a front waiter, and he wanted to start training me on how to be one. So he told me to shadow him when the next group of passengers were seated in our section so I could observe how he did his front waiter duties. Unfortunately for us, the next group of passengers seated in our section was an 8-top of Karens. Bert and I welcomed them to the restaurant. They were friendly at first, and the head Karen, an older, heavier-set man, asked, "There is a show in the main theater we want to see that begins in about an hour. Is it possible for us to get our dinners, eat it, and get to the show on time?" To which Bert said, "Absolutely, depending on what you order." After looking over the menu, the Karens were ready to place their order, and 5 out of 8 of them wanted the New York steak, the one single menu item that took the longest to cook. Bert told them this and that if they all wanted to order the NY steak, there is no guarantee that we can get them their dinners fast enough to eat and be able to get to the show on time. Bert suggested alternative dishes that we could get out much quicker, but the Karens refused to change their orders. Bert read the order back to the Karens, and they all confirmed that it was correct. This is important for later. Bert handed me the ticket, and I ran back to the kitchen to assemble their meals. My first stop was the NY steak counter, and to my horror, there was a line a mile long of waiters waiting to drop off their tickets. Just so you know, This ship has a maximum capacity of about 3,500 passengers. The main dining hall seats nearly 1,000 people, and I have never seen the NY counter as busy as it was this night. It seemed like everyone and their mothers were ordering the NY steak. I would have to wait at least 20 minutes just to drop off my ticket, and God knows how long afterward until the cook got to my ticket in order to cook them. With the wait time and juggling the other tables Bert and I had to wait on in our section, I knew there was no chance the Karens can get their meals and make it to the show on time. So I rushed out to Bert, told him what the ETA was on the NY steaks, and that he needed to tell the Karens that they needed to change their order, otherwise they would miss their show. Bert relayed my message to them. He came back to me and said that they still refused to change their order. Bert shrugged his shoulders and said, "Bert, well, we did all that we could to try and convince them to change their order so they can make it to the show they wanted to see, but they refused to change it, so if they miss their show, they miss it, and it will be their fault." I did my best to get their meal as quickly as possible, while also waiting on the other tables in our section. Sure enough, the Karens missed the start of the show, and they were pissed. They demanded to speak to the restaurant manager. They fabricated multiple lies about the crappy service they received, saying that we were lazy, incompetent, purposely dragged our feet, and lied about how long they were really waiting for their meals. They said they were waiting over an hour since they got their appetizers when it was only 50 minutes since they were seated in our section at most. Bert and I told the manager our side of the story. He believed us, said he would try to calm the Karens down, but told us to do our best to get the Karens their meals as quickly as possible so we can get them out of the restaurant ASAP. Finally, the meals were ready. I brought them out to the Karens and hoped that this would be the end of the fiasco. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Two of the female Karens called Bert and me back to the table and complained, "Our steaks are rare. We ordered well done." Bert and I huddled. He looked over his notepad where he had the two ladies' steaks written down as rare. He asked me if I heard them say they wanted rare steaks when we took their order earlier on, and I nodded yes. Bert approached them and said, "Bert, ladies, my back waiter and I both heard you two say you wanted rare steaks. I read the order back to you, and you both said that the order was correct." But the Karens responded, "We've never ordered rare steaks in our lives. You two messed up. Take these back, we don't want them. We want brand new steaks." So Bert handed me the steaks and told me to go back into the kitchen and order 2 well-done New York steaks on the fly, which is restaurant lingo for it's an emergency, and we need this order right now. So I rushed back into the kitchen. The NY steak counter was still busier than it's ever been. I rushed to the cook and asked for 2 well-done NY steaks on the fly. The cook angrily yelled at me, "No one is getting anything on the fly tonight. You get your ass to the back of the line and wait your turn like everyone else." At this point, I began to panic. It was going to be at least another 40 minutes, if not longer, for the two Karens to get their well-done steaks. In an alternate reality, this would be an Malicious compliance story where I make the Karens wait the near hour-long time for them to get their new steaks as they requested. But I didn't want Bert to deal with the Karens any longer than he had to, and the restaurant manager did tell me to do my best to get them their meals ASAP so we can get them out of the restaurant as quickly as possible. So cue the malicious compliance. The Karens wanted well done. They're going to get well done. There were microwaves in the kitchen. I flipped the steaks over to hide the previously made cut marks, threw them into the microwave, and nuked them until they were well done. I brought them back out to the Karens and prayed to every deity I could think of that they wouldn't realize what I had done. Fortunately, they didn't. The Karens ate their meal in complete silence, giving Bert and me the dirtiest glares while doing so, and stormed off when they were finished. Once they left, I told Bert what I did. It took him a moment to process what I told him, and he finally said, "Bert, under normal circumstances, I would be very upset with you, and I strongly suggest that you never do what you just did ever again. However, these aren't normal circumstances. Those people were rude, unreasonable, liars, and they didn't even tip. So you know what? Fuck them. I'm glad they missed their fucking show. In the near 2 years I've worked on that ship, I've dealt with many Karens. Stories for another day. But I'll never forget this one. Just a reminder to everyone reading this story to please be kind to your waiters." The next one is an entitled people story. This happened a while ago. I learned a long time ago how to study effectively for tests. I was in college and needed to study for an upcoming test, so I was in the local library at a single table. I had everything spread out and color-coded with colored pens, pencils, markers, and highlighters. I was absorbed in what I was doing. A sweet, cute, and adorable little girl came to me to ask politely if she could use some paper and colored pencils. I told her no. She smiled and nodded and went back to her mom. I was about to go back to studying when her mom appeared by my side and looked angry as hell. She told me to either let her daughter use my things or put them away. Her daughter looked miserable and embarrassed. I felt really sorry for her. I just stared at her in complete surprise at the sheer entitlement. I had heard stories of similar people, but had thought that it was exaggerated. I told her to leave me alone and go away. She told me I was being disrespectful to my elder. With a hard roll of my eyes, I told her, "Idiot, I am at least a few years older than you." She started screaming, which brought the librarian over. Y'all, I have never seen this woman be tough. I thought she was a pushover. She was so sweet and treated everyone like they were her babies. She was like the grandma everyone wanted. She went from sweet grandma to raging badass. Hell, she scared me worse than the time I got mock-charged by a mama bear. She yelled at her, "What did I tell you about coming here again? Your daughter is welcome to come here." "You are not. You've been banned from here for harassing everyone here. Get out now." I'm pretty sure my eyes were popping out of my face. I was definitely slack-jawed. The entitled mom was backing up pretty fast. Then from raging badass in a split second back to sweet elderly grandma, she gave the little girl a hug and a kiss on her forehead. She came over to me to see if I was okay and grinned at my shocked face. I always let people think that I'm too sweet to be tough. The surprise is effective. I nodded and started packing up my things, and told her that I would never be able to refocus on my studies for that day. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.